Seeking the wise.
With Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy.
Covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
If you're looking to apply self-development concepts to your daily life and want some awesome tools and techniques for your self-development journey, you have found the right place. We are the Wise Podcast. I am Aaron, and along with me on this journey is Alexander.
Hello, beautiful people. We're going to get into how to apply these concepts on a daily basis from a frequency perception so that you can effectively change aspects of your life through growth, through self-awareness, and through utilizing your relationships. So let's get into it. What are we getting into today, Aaron?
You know, when you said that, I was like, the beautiful people.
Yeah,
the beautiful people.
I can hear that in the background.
Oh, yeah. So today we're going to do more analyzing some Am I Overreacting Reddit stories. This is probably our 6th or 7th episode doing this. So if this is something that you really resonate with, you can go back and listen to those previous episodes. So today we're starting off with the first one is titled, Am I Overreacting? My baby's father intentionally tries to make my life harder. And I think this is something that is, again, prevalent where two people have a child, maybe they're no longer together, and, you know, they're not really getting along for the children's sake, and it ends up being kind of a competition between the two. Okay, starting off, we have context. I am living with my daughter's dad until I get back on my feet, and I swear he tries to make my life more difficult on purpose. My daughter is on her phone way too much. She is 10 years old, and especially at night. So starting about 2 nights ago, I finally implemented a no phone after 10 rule. And I now take the phone and iPad at 10 every school night, and she has been sleeping so much better and not napping after school anymore. She used to nap for 4 to 5 hours because she was staying up late on her phone. It's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you're wondering why I didn't implement this rule sooner, it's because her father doesn't agree. He literally thinks that she can take care of herself and knows how much sleep she needs. And she's getting enough sleep altogether, even if that means adding in the 5-hour nap after school. And he says that's fine and that she's kind of insane for thinking that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So then she goes on to get into the story. She says, I have an interview tomorrow for a job that I might be working past 10 on weekdays. And I asked him to please make sure that she doesn't have her phone or iPad after 10 on school nights, as she's been doing great with her schedule so far. She also does volleyball, so it's very important she gets enough sleep at night, not only in general, but for school and sports too. He basically told me he'll make sure she's asleep by 10:30 and not 10. I don't understand why he can't just stick to the schedule we've been sticking to. It's 30 minutes earlier, and it has been working well for her so far. He also does nothing but eat and watch anime from 8 to 12, so there's no reason he can't make sure she is asleep with no electronics by 10. So basically just saying that she doesn't feel like he's doing anything that could prevent that. So that's the story. Initial reactions. I feel like this is a great episode to touch upon because not only do we have the specifics of this story, but also this is something that comes up a lot in relationships, again, like I mentioned at the beginning. So one important thing, Alexander, as I bring you in here, is I feel like what's the most important for the child should be taken into account here, which is probably the structure, right?
Yes, and but the obstacle here is that the mother is needing a place to stay, and the father is providing the place for her to stay. So obviously the relationship didn't work out because they saw things differently, whether that was around raising the child or how they spent their social time or work or whatever it was, but obviously they didn't work out because she says X, right? I think that was it in the beginning. Yep. And so, yes, for the overall good of the daughter would be ideal, but see, if they work together in an ideal way, they probably wouldn't be splitting up. So this is
Hmm.
probably nothing new, but see, an ongoing problem for the mother because she wants the father to be different than he is. So here's a situation to where, when somebody else is housing you, it's very respectful to work with them within the realms of what they see as fit and use that as incentive to change the situation so that hopefully the mother could get her own place within a fairly quick amount of time. See, there's nothing wrong with her presenting this to the father and requesting it. But if he denies that and says, "Yeah, I will," 30 minutes later, then here I see that that's where the mother needs to consider the adaptation, because at least he's backing her up. Uh, we could say like 80 to 85%. It's just a slightly different time frame, and this could, obviously they probably have power play issues, but in this situation, the father happens to be carrying the majority of the power because it sounds like he's housing and giving the mother a place to stay, even while they're splitting up or something. It sounds like those details are going on. So yes, I do agree that what would be ideal is a consistent schedule for the child and both parties, both parents, supporting that. But this may be a situation to where the mother needs to adapt to maybe that 10:30 rule to show some respect and appreciation toward the father that's providing a place for her to live.
Yeah, I think this is a good example of preferences,
Hmm.
even though it probably would be best for the child to go to bed at 10 since she has been the last, I think, 2 nights. I was it 2 nights
Hmm.
ago. So the structure's not really there yet, but she could really make the situation worse by wanting her preferences, and demanding that it's at 10. And this is, we've talked about this in a past episode where there wasn't a child involved, and it was about accepting that person for who they are and not needing them to change. But now there's a child involved. So
Hmm.
would the situation be different? Because you did mention, okay, she's staying at his place, and so there's kind of some adapting that probably needs to happen on her end.
Hmm.
But let's extend this out and say that she does get her own place, and when her daughter is at her place, it's 10 o'clock, and then because this is something that happens all the
Sure.
time where there's not a consistency with where whichever house the child's on, and we're gonna talk about bedtime taking away electronics. So again, if they're both on the same page for what's best for the child, then it would be a consistency in that.
Hmm.
But let's say the father, again, he has a different view. So let's say his view is okay at 11 o'clock. Let's just put a little more gap
Hmm.
in there. How what? How would this change the situation?
Yeah, I mean, well, this is very common in split households, and the way one parent wants to parent, again, typically isn't the same as the other parent, or many times they wouldn't be separated or divorced. And the father has already said that he feels that she gets the enough sleep, whether it's a 4 or 5 hour nap in the afternoon or whatever. So, see, he's already given his outlook on it. But see, to me, he's gone and taken another step forward to say, okay, I will do that by 10:30. But the mother is still acting like that's not good enough. No, I need it to be exactly at 10. And I don't see him budging on that. I mean, that's because again, you got to look at a power play that's happening here, and 30 minutes is maybe where the mom in this situation should count her blessings and just be glad that the father is willing to cut it off at 10:30 because he's already said that he don't really see a problem. So this is where it gets tricky with people and their preferences not seeing when someone is trying to make a good effort to work with the mother here in this situation, and that's still not good enough. And this is very common for type A or controlling type people that feel like they need it exactly when they want it. And this creates rifts in relationships. When when you join with another person and you become intimate, and whether a kid's involved or it's not involved, it becomes more than just your preferences. Now you've got somebody else involved that you need to consider and work towards some type of middle ground to get on the same page. And I remember that even myself and Sherry, my wife that passed, us getting on the same page about how we were going to raise her two sons, her two 3-year-olds when we got together, twins. And, it was very important to me that we had the same rules because we lived in separate houses, but that we had the same rules no matter whether we were at my house or her house. But see, she and I had to work on that together, and we had to get it to a point to where both of us saw it similarly, and that therefore it meant that we were probably going to be more likely to follow through with it. See, the more different you see it with somebody, many times the harder it is to truly get to that place of consistency. And I still want to mention that I do feel that consistency is one of the most important characteristics when raising children. Even if there's dysfunction in the environment, if it's a consistency to it, the child can learn how to adapt to it. It's the inconsistency that creates more traumas and trauma responses later on in life.
Yeah, that extra 30 minutes that he added on, it does kind of seem like a power play, but also it could be because, we talk about the human design and we utilize that on this podcast. And there are some people who have like, the upper centers all activated in a line. And usually to, to get them to change or see a different way, you have to kind of make them think that it was their idea.
Mhm.
So he could just be that type of person
Sure.
that is like, no, I'm not doing 10. I'll do 10:30.
Yes.
Like, because maybe he does see the benefit of it, but he doesn't want to admit it, and so that's kind of his way of saying that he admits it without giving all the power up.
Yes, and see, and then it does sound like a power play because as soon as he goes over 30 minutes, then see she has an issue and wants to take that 30 minutes away. So that's normally proof that there is a power play happening here. And that's probably been a big part of the demise of the relationship. And the main person that's going to suffer is the child moving forward. So, in the situation, hopefully these two could find a third party that they could talk with and maybe help getting on the same page about what is for the highest good for the daughter and for both parties to be involved in supporting that. But it does sound like there's some communication issues here, which is very, very common, and that there's power plays unfortunately happening as well.
So, would you describe yourself as a type A personality?
Formerly, certainly, in my late teens and 20s, that was certainly the case. I was hyper focused on my career and didn't really put too much emphasis on relationships, and I was very fixed in the way that I approached things. Through over 26, 27 years of uh, developing self development practices and working with those on a daily basis, I've let go of a lot of that need to control and interest in directing everything, especially for those around me. Now, I may make suggestions, but I have learned to find so much more peace in allowing everybody to be exactly who they are and who they want to be and stop projecting my wants onto them. Has been very, very freeing, and it was necessary for me to work through my healing trauma, my trauma response of chest pain. So pain is a great teacher, and as Bruce Lee has said, when you get the lesson, the pain leaves. And so follow that very much as well, and look at pain and discomfort in the body as a message. And normally it means there's an action or a perception that we need to change, so that that pain or discomfort will go away.
Would you say that I'm a type A personality?
I think you certainly have type A characteristics, and many times one of the main characteristics of a type A person is hyperfocus. And by hyperfocus, what I mean with that is sometimes when the person hyperfocuses on somebody else or something else, they can forget, they can get tunnel vision and not be aware of the cost and what other people are going through, while they're so hyper focused. So that's one of the main characteristics of that type A type of person is hyper focus, and normally there's success, financial and business success that can come with that type of person, but normally relationships aren't very healthy at all, and so that's where the imbalance can come in.
Yeah, I would say that this situation sounds like a nightmare.
Yes.
So, because I would want to be controlling my child's
Yeah.
bedtime, and it would be hard for me to be in the situation, especially after she gets her own place, and then she's left wondering, is the structure happening
Mhm.
at that other house?
Yes.
And then because everything that you're working for or working toward in your house, and you're establishing the structure, and once she leaves your house, it's almost like she may lose it if it's not, and then it just only hurts the child. So, man, I mean, that's kind of why, partly why I've never put myself in that
Well,
situation.
that I mean, it's a very important thing to think about who you're joining up with, and then what is the intention. Because if you're bringing children in, or you're building businesses or things like that, these complications arise. But I want to share that, due to this being the plane of polarity in our second pillar, polarity versus duality, opposites have to exist. And see, these children have to experience opposite of whatever their home life is. So, for instance, when I was raising the boys, they would go to their biological fathers every other weekend, and it was a very, very different situation. And there wasn't the attention to detail, and there wasn't the parenting, and it was more like they got to play all the video games that they wanted to play, and so it seemed cool for a young kid. But of course, we didn't share anything negatively about that. We just knew it was going to take about 3 days for them to get back balanced out when they come from just 2 days of spending time at their dad's. But they always would adapt back, and so that's what you're looking at here, is that all you can do as a parent is instill in your children, when they're with you, what you feel like is the optimal building blocks for a successful lifetime. But they still have to go out there into the world, whether it's to another parent, or it's a friend's house, or party, or whatever it is. They still have to go out there into the world and experience the opposite of optimal. And and sometimes those experiments bring on tragedies and many different types of things. So I wanted our listeners to hear that some of you that are battling out there with co-parenting, look at it as it's an opportunity for them to learn a different way. And children are extremely resilient and more smart than most parents give them credit for, and they pay attention to what works and what doesn't work. And so my boys got to see one type of relationship with me and their mom, and how we communicated and how we enjoyed being together. And then they got a whole different experience when they went to their dads that was almost the exact opposite. So now as adults, see, they have two different experiences to pull on from a consistent nature. So I think more of the issue here is remembering that kids are resilient and they are very adaptable. That the more the problem comes in when the parents fight in front of the children or away from them, instead of just accepting that, hey, we approach this very differently. And when they're with me, they're going to follow these rules and this outline. And when they're with you, they can follow yours. Again, there's a teaching in there if both of the parents can come from an accepting space. But when they come in resistance and these power plays, many times the kid gets dragged in the middle of that. And that's what we hope to avoid in any situation similar.
Yeah, all that is a good point, especially the experiencing the polarities, because you have children brought up in like a very strict, like, religious
Mhm.
setting, and when they get old enough, then they do the exact opposite, because they never had that
Right.
experience. They don't know where to place that. So, not saying that it would be optimal to have two different living situations for a child, but
Yeah, but
there,
always
there could be some benefit.
sure. And when, some parents raise their kids and they are on the same page, but it's religiously backed, it can be very dominating and create a rebellious spirit, in the child. And so I think there's an equilibrium in all of this. And to realize that the more you press something on anybody, the more they're going to want to resist it. So I'll be one of the first people to say I'm not saying that there is a so-called right way or optimal way to raise children, because one thing you got to take into account is um, their birth information and the way that they were designed by the divine when they came in here. That's why we look at the human design and the destiny card system to help to understand how optimally to, direct a child or a person instead of trying to project what we want them to be or what we didn't get as children. That's what most parents are guilty of, is they want to give kids all the things that they never had, and instead of doing that, they could give the kids all the information that they never received and help teach them rather than buying them things. So whether the parents are together or co-parenting in separate homes or even under the same roof but not together like this story, there's no ideal type of situation. And the main thing I feel like is getting down to how the communication happens and the consistency of effort. And then trusting that if you're raising a child with high morals and integrity, that will come out eventually. But they may have to go through an experimental phase and resist that. And that normally comes down to how much the parent forces that kind of stuff on the child.
Yeah, that's also a good point, which is parents don't want their children to struggle, perceive struggle like they did, but that's how we grow.
Hmm.
So if the parent gives their child everything so they don't have to struggle, then they're going to be coddled and they're not going to, I mean, I guess essentially would spoiled be similar in a similar energy to never having struggled? I guess
Yeah.
that's probably
Yeah,
close.
that's helicopter parents, can be guilty of that, and then yeah, the child isn't prepared to go out in the world and not get what they want. They don't know how to process that. So, so again, this is where there's plenty of different parenting styles and teaching styles out there, and we're not going to go down that road necessarily, but seeing that the way one person sees optimally to raise a child isn't necessarily going to be in alignment with somebody else. So again, I think this is important for more young people to talk about before the idea of bringing a child into this world is very important. And sometimes people can use pets for like a little bridge to see how you manage the cat or the dog is going to be a good representation of the energy that's going to go toward a child. So I think that that's a very good step, for people to really pay attention to who they're partnering with in these other ways to get a clear vision of what the future may hold. But see, too many people think that they're going to be able to change their partner. That's the main problem here. So I do feel that giving a child opportunities to be challenged, to be tempted, all of those types of things are very important because that's what the world is going to bring eventually. And so I think that when a child has two different experiences, two different types of parenting, it can be useful. The main problem comes down with the bickering, like I said earlier, between the parents. But if there's no bickering and it's just two different lifestyles, then again, the child will grow up experiencing which one brings them more fulfillment. And then they should have the right to choose which direction, they want to continue going.
Yeah, I think when children are younger, they're always going to rebel against the structure and the discipline. But as they get older, then they realize, okay, that's what they
Yes.
respect. So that
Yeah, it's
seems to
very
be,
important that structure and discipline is what makes a child feel safe, but they're going to resist it. So that's okay. That's a big part of the parenting. And that's what I feel like we need to get more of an understanding about in so called self development and spirituality is that a big part of this path, similar to the way we ideally raise the kids, isn't about us always getting our way. It's about us setting an intention and going in a certain direction and then being willing to work with life, with the divine, and into where we're going to wind up. Um, and this isn't the way that everybody approaches life. So again, it's not about what's right or wrong. It's just about what seems to be fulfilling you or not.
yeah. And I think the most important thing out of that, or that I want to call attention to, is when you mentioned communicating to that child, like she could communicate why it's important to not have electronics, why it's important to get good sleep, or even when she does get her own place, why it's important that the rules are a certain way at her place. And again, the child may not 100% comprehend,
Hmm.
but just being open and honest about why rules are set instead of just setting rules and saying this is what's best for
Yeah, I
you.
mean, too many parents talk at their children rather than with their children. And then some people say, well, I don't talk with them because they can't understand everything I'm saying. But see, the more consistently that they hear words and phrases, the faster that they're going to get it. So that's why I just, from the time the boys were 8 years old on, I would talk to them like an adult. But I would make sure that I was present. I would make sure that we were seeing each other eye to eye. And I was making sure not to shut them down through intimidation in any way, because them as projectors, they would. If I brought any forceful energy like my father brought, they would just shut down and clam up. And so, in order for me to communicate with them, I had to see work with them rather than barking at them and yelling at them. And that's more the style that my family represented. And I just remember how ineffective that was for me. So I just always felt that when I had children, I would operate a different way. And fortunately, I was able to.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this free full version of the Wise podcast. Now, before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a second and say if you are loving what you're hearing, we do have a complete conversation premium subscription option where you can get all of our back 160 plus episodes to utilize and further your self-growth journey. And you can do that by going to the wisewisepodcast.com, click on the Get Complete button at the top, and follow the instructions. If you have any issues, you can reach out to me and I will help you take care of them. But this is for the serious individuals who are ready to take that next step, ready to make their self-growth journey a priority, ready to enhance their relationships all around, ready to accept the world for how it is and no longer be torn by the duality of the external reality. Oh, I like that. So if that's you, if you want to take that next step, consider supporting us on this journey and sharing this information. Now, if you're looking for a little more Alexander and maybe a private consultation, you can reach out to him at his website, thejustphilosophy.com, or email him at alexander@thejustphilosophy.com. On his website, you will see his different offerings, a variety of relationship coaching, energetic design consultations where we'll look at your human design chart and your destiny cards and provide a personal prescription for you. If you're in the North Carolina area, Alexander also has a variety of different sound journey events that are being posted on his website. He also is the inventor of the Vibertune sound therapy table, which 15 minutes on this vibrating table, listening to music that he composed, leaves you in a state of contentment. It feels like an energetic blanket has just laid upon you and you're back in the womb. It's a really great experience. So if you're in the North Carolina area and you want to reach out to him to even just ride the table, reach out to him at his email address. And of course, he has a variety of other tools and music that he's composed that you can get there. So anyway, with that said, I want to get you back to the rest of this episode, and thank you for working on you. All right, I think that's a wrap for story number 1. For story number 2, we're going to get right into it. Am I overreacting for being upset that my friends wouldn't let me in their van during a storm? So a couple of months ago, 20-year-old female, went on a camping trip with 2 friends, also both 20-year-old females, for the weekend. They had a small camper van, while I just had a cheap pop-up tent from Walmart. Since we were all traveling in their van, I didn't have much to say in where we camped, so I just had to go along wherever they decided. The first night was fine, but on the second night, a massive storm, heavy rain rolled in. We were in the middle of nowhere, it was getting dark, and the wind picked up, and the rain started coming down hard. I got really worried about my tent. I already knew it wasn't waterproof because I had used it before and noticed it leaked when it rained, like the drops would literally go right through it. I told my friends multiple times that my tent wouldn't hold up in this kind of weather, but one of them kept brushing it off, saying it would be fine. It felt as if she was trying to convince me that it would be all right, even though I kept trying to tell her that I would get soaked. She then said I couldn't sleep with them either because that would be too crowded. They were sharing a queen-size mattress. The other friend was a bit more sympathetic, but also didn't push the issue. I mean, their van wasn't huge, and it would have been a tight squeeze, but I thought maybe just for one night they'd let me crash inside with them. But nope, nothing. Since we were in a remote area with other options, I was prepared for the worst, but then we found a covered picnic shelter where I threw my tent under, so it was all fine in the end. But in hindsight, I'm still pretty upset that my friends would not allow me in their bus because they did not want to give up their comfort. Am I overreacting for feeling hurt and disappointed by this? So it all worked out in the end, Alexander,
Yeah.
but this is, I mean, again, like situations like that, I mean, even for me, situations like this, even though it worked out, maybe this is some of that resentment that comes in for me.
That's good.
Because I still, it's like that saying, I still cannot believe somebody had this sort of view or said this thing to me. Even though it all worked out in the end and things were fine and I wasn't affected in some way, I can still find myself thinking about the words that were said. Maybe somebody had a view about me that I didn't feel like was fair, things like that. So I definitely resonate with this sort of reaction because I can see how I do similar things, maybe not as much as in the past, but that emotion is still inside me.
Yeah, and here, beautiful example of everybody is always showing you like who they are. But sometimes we need certain situations to come up before we will accept who they are. In this example, I don't know how long these girls have been friends, but there's probably been many similar situations to where this person has felt like the outcast, hasn't been invited, in as much as the other two, that type of thing. But maybe she shrugged it off over and over and over until this time of so-called need. And see, they just handled it consistently the way they probably have in many, many different situations. Now, she didn't say that she was, scared for her life or anything like that. So it just sounded like it was just a simple rainstorm. And it sounds simple enough coming from this person that got rejected that, hey, why would it be a big deal for this one night for this person to be in the van with these people? But see, we haven't heard from the other two that might say, well, we've done this over and over, allowed her in, and then she does this, and it ruins our time, it ruins our night, blah, 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 blah. So we're going off of limited information here, but the general teaching from the Just philosophy that we want to get into is these preferences and preferences being projected onto other people about how we want them to act, speak, instead of making a note every time they do or say something that rubs you the wrong way and learning to adapt yourself. So, maybe this girl, if she knew that they were going camping and there was a possibility of rain and that there's a likelihood that they might not let her get in the van, then A, maybe she doesn't go on the trip. B, maybe she drives separately so that she has a vehicle that she can sleep in. There are many other options that would be useful for this young lady to learn how to adapt. Because again, here we're going to bring in that it's not the strongest that will survive or the smartest that will survive, it's the one that can adapt. Therefore, consciousness is connected to the one that is able to adapt in any situation. And so I think this young lady has a lot to learn from this situation, and no judgment has to be passed on to these other ones if she learns to adapt. But if she didn't learn anything to adapt, then there probably is going to be projection and disappointment and bitterness towards these two. And so I don't know if anyone will gain anything from this experience, because we would have to speak to each one of them individually and truly understand the role that they're playing. But just be careful out there, people, that in these situations, when you're getting information from one person in one direction only, just know that you're not getting the complete truth. You're just getting one perception. And that sounds like kind of what we're dealing with here. And of course, they're 20, so they're really young and haven't had time to possibly practice a lot of the things that we're discussing. But we don't want to limit our listeners to just these age groups. We want them to be able to learn something from any age group.
Yeah, a lot of that was well said. I think, like you said, the important part is looking where she could have taken more responsibility for herself. Like you said, if you know you're going camping, you're gonna look at the weather and you're gonna plan ahead for all sorts of situations. So it seems like there was a lack of communication between all of them on what could happen, or a lack of preparation on her part for even, not wanting to ask. And yeah, maybe the energy it has always been a little different, and that's never been communicated. So now it's showing up in a stronger way because she hasn't gotten the lesson yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And fortunately, things did work out and she was able to have shelter and that kind of thing. So, that's where we learn to trust everything being divinely guided, our first pillar of the just philosophy. And, but going back to your comparison or the way that you were relating to it, to just always, anytime we're in that disbelief, so to say, or can't believe somebody said this or can't believe that they did this, then that's always like a big siren in my head to go off to like, hey, there's a lesson here to learn. What do you need to adapt to? Because you're not accepting the person or the situation for exactly what it is. There's a preference there that we want it to be different. And in that preference is normally where we project onto the other people being the problem, rather than us learning the lesson internally and going, hey, is this different actions of this person? Almost 100% of the time, the answer is going to be no. There's very few surprises that people really bring you, especially if you spent more than, say, 6 months around them off and on, because people act out of patterns. And the unconscious people don't pay attention to the patterns, and they continue to get surprised by the actions of these people. So part of self-development work is self-awareness. And in that self-awareness is being aware of your environment. And see, awareness isn't enough. The next step is acceptance. So once you're aware of yourself, once you're aware of your environment, then, hey, can you accept yourself in the situation? Can you accept the situation and the people that are involved? Because if you can't, your next step isn't going to be conscious. If you can, then there's no preference. We're accepting everything to flow exactly how it's going to. And due to me watching and paying attention to patterns, I'm not going to be surprised here. So I'm going to be most adaptable. So I hope that helps on a more general term, and we're just using kind of this story as a springboard to jump off from.
Yeah, I think one situation that I find myself in that I seem to have a dwelling process on still is when I feel like I could have handled something different in the
Hmm.
moment. Like, why didn't I say that?
Sure.
Or a person put me in a situation where I energetically felt off base and I should have been more present and grounded and stood in my power. And looking back on it now, I kind of like cringe at myself for not kind of sticking up for myself and allowing that person to energetically like bulldoze
Hmm.
me, even though I don't know, maybe that is what they were trying to do, maybe it wasn't, but I felt myself kind of off center, um, and like spontaneously reacting to that energy
Right.
shift. So yeah, I can sit with those, and of course, it's important to reflect and think about, okay, how could I do this differently next time? But sometimes that can get into this because it feels like I wasn't the best support for myself. Like I
Hmm.
didn't do what was best for myself in that situation. So I feel kind of off. Like what is the word? Like I feel like I wasn't the best version of myself, or I didn't practice what I know to do in those situations. I didn't take a
Yes.
breath
Yes. All that,
first.
I mean, all that is very vulnerable and beautiful to share
Like
because
I failed
yeah, you
myself, I
failed
guess.
yourself. And see, of course, we have to fail in order to learn. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing right off the bat is anytime the would've, could've, or should've thought comes in, that means that there's time for an adjustment to happen. And if we go through 3 steps where we say, "Okay, what do I see that I participated in that wasn't optimal?" Then the second step is, "Okay, this is what I see I need to do different to not put myself in that situation again." And then the third thing is, "This is what I'm going to practice every day so that I am prepared for that situation next time and I will handle it more optimal." That for me relieves all of the woulda, couldas, or shouldas because the mistake was necessary for this new way. And the new way is no mas or no more. Moving forward from this point on, I won't make that mistake again. So, see, a mistake made one time is a teaching moment, and we should almost learn to yearn for those failures. But it's the repeated failures that are the issue. And the repeated failures happen because those 3 steps aren't taken. Recognizing what we did that wasn't optimal, taking the time to reflect on what we need to do different moving forward, and then the third thing is how I'm going to practice this on a daily basis to be prepared for that to happen again. And life will set it up for another opportunity. See, life sets us up to either continue patterns or break patterns. And the difference is how present we are. And the other key here is the more preference you have in a situation, the less present you are because you're in what I call hopeful energy. And hopeful energy isn't grounded. And so this is why we bring up over and over to pay attention to your preferences and that many times attraction is distraction. So whatever we're attracted to and we have preferences around, we're probably not seeing it clearly. So as you said, you missed the breath, and we teach to before any action to learn to take a breath, before any word, before any movement, to learn to take a breath. Because in a lot of times that breath is what will separate that pattern and it will create a breaking of the pattern rather than a repeating of the pattern.
Yeah, I think that third step, that practice is the key here for all of this, because, in this situation, she could think about it and be like, "Okay, well, I'm never gonna go camping unprepared again." Okay. Well, that's fine, but then another scenario could come up where what if it's a guy that she likes and he's like, "Oh, no, don't worry about it. You can stay with me." So the variables are different but it's the same situation presenting itself. And maybe
Yes.
it's not camping, but maybe it's something similar energy where she needs to prepare. So then she could find herself off center. And again, like in the situation where it's a different energy, so it's not the same, so you don't recognize it right away. And if you're not practicing it, you're not going to recognize it because it's, again, different variables. So she could find herself in the same situation. So in this example, what or how can she practice that on a daily basis? What would be optimal?
Okay, well, in this example, first thing I'm going to start with is always making sure that whatever you need is covered. And that's for life. That's not just camping. But this is why I'm not a fan of carpooling myself. I dig the part of it of saving emissions and saving time and being able to visit. But being a generator in the human design, I know myself, and one of the generator's biggest issues is when they can't leave a certain place or situation because they rode with somebody or they're staying under somebody else's roof or something like that. So I'm always willing to inconvenience myself to drive wherever I'm going, no matter who suggests that I ride with them. Because when I'm ready to leave, I don't want that to be up for discussion and I don't want to inconvenience somebody else. So see, that's one place to start. That if she's in a camping situation, again, then she may want to make sure that she drives her vehicle so that she's covered under any kind of weather. Like I said, I think this is more than camping with this particular situation. So that's like the first step is just let me make sure that I've got what I need personally, and if I don't have what I need, I may not want to uh, do that. Second part is truly working to accept people for who they are every day. So, see, the first thing that I suggested is you practice every day before you leave the house. You make sure if there's a chance of rain, you've got your raincoat or you've got your umbrella, you've got your boots, that you have time every day to prepare for whatever you need out there in the world. And see, some people are rushing through life that they're never prepared for whatever they need. And that's the likelihood of this young lady. So see, that's the first place to start practicing. Let me make sure I've got everything I need and that I've got time to get all that stuff together. The second part is accepting everybody for exactly who they are. And instead of, like, if you meet somebody and you really like them, to pull those reins back and go, hey, time will tell. Time is the tattletale, people. So if you give enough time to play out, you'll truly see who somebody is rather than what they are putting on at that moment. And again, we don't need to guilt the other person because almost everybody does this. Almost everybody wants to be liked, so they put on certain type of airs, in the beginning. But the other area to practice this is around family or people that you've known a long, long time. That anytime you catch yourself going, I wish they didn't think that way, or I wish they would just do it this way, then to remind yourself, oh, we've got some practice and acceptance to do. Let me accept exactly the way that they do it. Because again, acceptance does not mean condoning or approving of. It simply means you're not going to carry resistance with it. That's the thing. Learn to be around people that do things that are different from your way to a point that it doesn't bother you. And then remove yourself from that person or that situation. But see, you may need to interact many, many times at different time frames. I've suggested in past episodes of how I've managed certain people in my family to go spend time with them, but I would set a time limit. And I would pay attention to that time limit, and my goal was to leave every time without that bitterness type of quote of why did they have to say that? Why did they have to do that? If I get to that, I stayed too long. But see, over time in this practice of every day, you can expand the amount of time that you can be around those that operate differently than you. And that's something that I feel like almost everybody can find benefit from utilizing.
So it's funny that you brought up the carpooling, probably because we had just talked about it. And so for the people out there, I went on a bowling trip and I carpooled with some of my teammates, and it was like 4 hours away, and I was fine doing it. Like in theory, again, this is in
Mhm.
theory, like I'm fine doing it. But once I'm there, and like of course, I had my own separate hotel room, so I had my own
Space.
time, and but but now that I don't have a car, I find myself thinking, oh, maybe, oh, I can't go here, I
Mhm.
can't go here, I can't. Like in the morning, we bowled really early in the morning, and I had to carpool with somebody else because they weren't all going at the same time as me, and I drink coffee. I drink 1 cup a day, so I'm like, "Oh, I could really use a cup of coffee on the way," but I didn't wanna inconvenience anybody, so I didn't, so I just accepted that, "Hey, I chose to do
Mhm.
this,
Good
and
call.
there are some things, some freedoms that I have to give up." So, adapting wise, so I just got a cup at the bowling alley, which, of course, is, like, the lowest grade
Sure.
stuff. It did a it did its job, and it was fine, but, of course, it wasn't as enjoyable as it could have been
Mhm.
because I like to go to different coffee spots, like mom and pop shops and cafes and stuff like
Yeah.
that when I'm in a new area that I'm normally not. So I wasn't able to do that, but of course I saved time, money. I didn't have to drive,
Mhm.
so I didn't have to be on all the time. And I was able to have some really good conversations about life, about religion, the difference between religion and spirituality, and all that with some really good people.
Mhm.
So it was, there's trade offs, there's
Sure.
cost to all of it. But I did. It's funny. I just did find myself thinking, "Oh, yeah, I would love to do this," and then I realized I can't. And I don't know if it was because I didn't have a car, but if I did have a car, would I even have those thoughts? I
Right.
don't
But
know.
see, for many, again, you're a generator. I happen to be a generator. And for generators, just that freedom that we can is very, very important, whether we act on it or not. And this is why convenience can get in the way of consciousness. Just like if you go to the convenience store, you can get some food, but is it really food? I mean, it's not necessarily very nutritious.
Yeah.
So it's the same like what's convenient, it'll save money, it'll save, like you said, having to hyper focus on driving, that kind of thing. But then the cost is this, this, and this. So now let me just ask you a simple question. If you had to do it again next weekend, would you carpool with the people or would you drive your own car?
For the same
Yeah,
distance? Well, I probably wouldn't go like that many weekends so close together
of
because
course.
that it was a lot being around other people a lot, and people that I'm not around a lot in general, so I got to learn more of their personalities and their ticks and stuff like
Mhm.
that. So
Yeah.
so would I do it again? I don't know. I'd have to really sit with it and think about where my priorities lie and
Yeah, and I think
where I
that
want to
that's
put my
all that
energy.
these moments are for, is to just assess, and in order to let go of any bitterness connected to it, it's that you become clear of whether you will handle it again like that or similar to that if it comes up again. And if so, then that means that you accept the costs, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
you're aware of them. And if not, that means that you're willing to make an adaptation to help the experience be more enjoyable. See, there's not a right or wrong here. It's just that we want to get out of that energy of throwing around the would have, could have, should have, because that's the wasteful energy. And then just get into, will I make an adjustment the next time something similar comes up, or am I happy to pay this cost for the convenience? Not a right or wrong. It's just how we're expending our energy is the thing to be aware of.
Yeah, one thing, and you kind of touched upon this, but one thing that I'm learning this late in life is when you aren't around somebody for long periods of time, they can seem one way. And the more time you spend with them, the more you get to see like their personality, their ticks. And I think that's probably the case with anybody. So I see the best in everybody, like rose-colored glasses type energy with most people. So I still have these situations where I'm like, "Oh, it'd be cool to hang out with this person for more than like a couple hours, every
Mhm.
week." And then not that I didn't have a good time, it's just I'm like, oh, I kind of like my energy. I kind of like being alone more
Yes.
than being around people. So
Yeah, and that is a big part of it is how our energies meld, because just because we like somebody's personality or like them as a person and they're kind or whatever, that doesn't mean that when our energies come together that they're going to be harmonious over long periods of time. Because again, the just philosophy stands for journeys unite seeking transformation. So anytime two people come together, they're bringing an energy field. And see that you can be on the, and we always talk about the 5 levels: the spiritual, mental, emotional, energetic, and physical. And so, see, you can physically enjoy being around somebody that emotionally or energetically there's a friction. And so those are the type of things that time reveals, is like how we're really connecting with this person on all 5 of these levels. And many times we put too much emphasis on just the mental aspect, because that's where conversations come from, and then the physical aspect. And I think the more that we continue to work on the emotional, the energetic, and the spiritual, kind of brings more of that awareness in. Because same thing, you can enjoy an event like bowling, but once you really start becoming aware of your energy in certain types of bowling alleys, they have a lower vibration, and that can be having an effect on you physically, mentally, emotionally, just the energetics of the space or the energetics of these people that you're talking about spending more time with. So this is just a beautiful opportunity to bring up the importance of the energetics of things, because it can shift the perception, just the emotional state or the energetic state. Just like the spiritual state, if somebody comes at you too dogmatic or too religious, it puts up a resistance like right away. So bringing all 5 of these levels in and being aware of them, I think, is what the conscious or wise person is looking to do. And so to say, hey, well, physically and mentally, I can enjoy being around this person, but from an emotional standpoint, they're a little toxic. They complain a lot and they bitch about a lot. So I don't want to be around that. And see, that might not come out when you just spend short periods of time, little bursts with people. But when you start spending days or long hours together, all of these levels are going to be revealed. And that's where it can get a little bit more sketchy.
yeah, well, I really enjoyed how these conversations both blossomed out, with more stuff outside of the particular variables of these
Yeah.
stories. If you guys enjoyed them and want some more of Alexander and me and the Just Philosophy, we have 175 plus episodes now out and about. And you can get the full back catalog at wisewisepodcast.com. Click the Get Complete button in the upper right-hand corner, and you'll be on your way to some serious consciousness teachings. And then, of course, Alexander does his self-development and relationship consulting, utilizing the Just Philosophy and your Destiny card and human design energetic designs in unison to the teachings. So you can get that by going to thejustphilosophy.com, where you can also see his music and his sound tables that are also for sale. So get you some of that greatness. So with that said, Alexander, appreciate you as always.
Thank you,
Love
brother.
the wisdom you share today. And for everybody out there, thank you for tuning in.
Much love, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise.
And remember, Gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships. There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self-growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.